Hello, LinkedIn and YouTube. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. So good to see everyone today. We're very excited to have our CEO and our lead coach, Josh Saterman, here. Josh, welcome.
Hi.
Hi. I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit as we move into the summer, a little bit about the types of coaching. There's so many types of coaching that impact organizations and individuals. I know we don't talk about coaching from the standpoint of life coaching or wellness coaching, though those are valuable types of coaching. There are so many types to discuss when you're looking at it through the lens of an organization. And Josh, I thought we could start a little bit with your background and how you came to the area of coaching.
Great question. I often tell the story that I began my coaching journey very, very early in my career. I was very fortunate to have a mentor, a sponsor, and a senior leader whose name was Becky Dannenfelser. And Becky taught me that coaching was very different than telling or teaching. She asked me a lot of great questions, open questions, and guided me on that journey. And through that experience of meeting with me weekly, asking me open questions, challenging me to consider goals, I was introduced to the concept of coaching is all about goal setting and thinking about the way that you show up in terms of a conversation. From there, Becky actually ended up leaving the organization that I served and moved on to be a full-fledged executive coach, and that journey continued with me. So I continued with Becky and continued learning the power of goal setting and thinking about accountability partners, all things that are very much a part of the process of coaching.
You know, I really appreciate you talking about accountability partners and the power of coaching. I think that for those of us who are a bit more familiar with coaching and its impact, I think for individuals in learning and leadership, HR, or talent development, they've seen that impact. Perhaps you could share with us a story of how some type of professional coaching had a positive impact on an organization.
I'll share actually two examples. I'll share one example for me as a personal, and then one example for the organization at large. One of the conversations I had very middle part of my career, so to speak, was really around the idea of influencing. Influencing is such a powerful leadership attribute, factor. As you grow in your career, the ability to make decisions really stems on partners and allies within an organization to help you steer. This feedback specifically was around listening with your eyes. I've talked about this a bunch of times because I find it to be very helpful and supportive for those that are learning and listening through ears, but oftentimes don't necessarily watch the room. Who's taking notes? Who's sitting cross-legged? Who's sitting back in their chair? Who's leaning in? Whose eyes are making contact with those around them, watching the speaker as they speak or engage. All of those components are very much part of listening with your eyes. And that was the feedback I received, is when entering into a room with multiple parties or multiple experiences, is to watch the room and maybe not be the first to speak or the first to ask a question. Let the conversation unfold. And if you need to go back and address something, you can do that in a way that is significant by saying, you know, previously you spoke about this topic, and through that conversation, I had an observation I wanted to go back and share, right? So there's always opportunity to reflect and be able to address that. So for me, that was a powerful moment. I talk about it often. How do you listen with your eyes? I think from an organization standpoint, we talk a lot about the idea of building trust and the idea of building relationships. And it's why we're called Saterman Connect. We're called Saterman Connect because we believe that connections help to build trust and support the idea of healthy relationships, that you're not looking for sameness. You're looking for difference. You're looking for fresh perspective. And you can only really do that by establishing connection or trust. And so that's an example where organizations have embraced coaching and use that as a way to build their leaders and give them the tools, provide them the tools of self-awareness, self-identification around their leadership style and how they will connect, how they will build trust, how they will build relationships.
Well, building relationships is extremely important in any type of environment, right? We don't necessarily live and work alone. Humans are very social beings. I really appreciate the way you talked about the visual cues, that as someone who is a participant in any conversation or communication, you have a role to play. And part of that role is understanding the signals others are giving off to you around how they're receiving the information that's being shared or participating in a conversation. It would be great if we could start off talking about one of my favorite types of coaching, executive coaching, because I think that often it's leaders at the top who get the opportunity to be coached. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
So executive coaching is really a very structured type of coaching, which serves organizations incredibly well. It really starts with this idea of what we call felt need. What is the need that the client, or in this case, the coachee, some people refer to as coachee, really is looking to understand or unpack? We are humans. We are not perfect. I say this all the time. So we are on this journey of self-improvement, self-actualization, self-awareness. Those are all healthy pieces of ourselves to explore. The part of executive coaching that's so powerful is the feedback 360 portion of the arc of that coaching, where you identify anywhere from 7, 8, up to 12 folks in the organization, looking at senior leaders, peers, and junior colleagues or direct reports that can offer you feedback. Share the strengths and opportunities that you have as a leader to really think about and reflect and be able to take that feedback and apply it to actions, which is really the next stage of that engagement, really around goal setting, really thinking about the arc, starting with what your goals are, adding to the equation that feedback that you receive, so that feedback 360, really taking in the perceptions and perspectives of others, and then applying that to your ultimate goal setting for a quarter, a season, a year, to think about how you will invest in yourself. Oftentimes, organizations will refer to this investment around soft skills, listening, emotional intelligence, positivity. And we refer to that as critical skills. They're not soft, they're essential. A senior leader, a people leader, a new manager is really the most successful when they understand those critical skills of emotional intelligence, listening, engaging with their people, looking for differences, and not looking to have best friends they go to brunch with, but partners and colleagues and allies and influencers to help move the dial, help the business grow, help connect more with a client or customer, and really engage in the organization's objectives. That's executive coaching, is really investing in leaders within an organization in the organizational context setting. That's why it's a little different than leadership development coaching, where it may be more of an individual growth. Executive coaching is how the individual grows within the organization.
I really appreciate the way you frame that out, because I think for those young people or individuals who are new in a career, they may not understand the way in which leaders are showing up. I think there is the opportunity to gain a lens of how those in leadership positions are being guided and coached through to be better. But there are many people in middle management, or maybe they've just had a high degree of success within their experiences and their career, who have an opportunity to be coached for the first time. They are high potentials. And I'd love to talk a little bit about leadership development coaching and how that creates an opportunity to create the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, we talk a lot about emerging leadership. It's a critical component to organizations, is thinking about succession planning and talent pipeline. And oftentimes what you find is, because executive coaching may be quite expensive, you're seeing organizations like Ezra and BetterUp and others pop up And they're great. With no disrespect to them, they are great. What we try and accomplish is really embedding through management and leadership development programs, more sustainable change where organizations can invest in leadership development coaching through group coaching or team coaching. We lead a lot with Strengths by Gallup. Clifton Strengths is a great tool to understand how you leverage talents within yourself, within also a team dynamic.
Well, we'll get to that component in a minute. Can we talk a little bit about leadership development coaching and that specifically for those high potentials?
Yeah, that's where kind of I was going is leadership development is really exploring again the idea that you are part of a team and you as an individual may have opportunities to grow and develop as a young emerging leader, and young not looking at it from an age perspective, young looking at it from how many times have you managed a team, direct reports, and what ways have you managed those direct reports. That can be any age, but managing and being a people leader is a very different skill set than being an individual contributor or a subject matter expert. And so we talk about it in a very holistic sense. Executive coaching being embedded in the organization. Leadership development may be very specifically about yourself and some things that you need to work on as a human to really raise yourself up and think about you as an individual and how you're going to grow and invest in your leadership.
So why is it that I've often observed that some organizations either put individuals in their first leadership position and don't recognize that person may need guidance to grow into the leader they're seen as potentially becoming?
I think that's a great question. I do think that there's a couple of components. One is, of course, just cost. I think just ultimately we have to have some truth talk and share that organizations are trying to figure out who to invest in, why to invest in them, what does that talent pipeline look like. And so a lot of times what you find in coaching is, unfortunately, the haves and the have-nots, is that there are folks that are out there that are invested in and some folks are not. And that goes back to where there are systems and why our organization specifically focuses on equity and inclusion and belonging is how do you create equity even within the ideas of coaching. I also would say that many small companies just haven't had the ability yet to build out their leadership programs. That has nothing to do with equity per se yet. That just has to do with size and scalability and sustainability within the organization to provide that type of programming. If your HR team does not have a full-fledged learning and development organization, who helps to support and run those types of programs? And that's where we come in, is we're able to develop and design programs that are coaching based to really explain and teach the differences between telling, teaching, and coaching, and offer managers the ability to serve as coaches and again, invest in that talent pipeline. I do want to mention before we go any further though, that part of the challenge is that we're in this system. The treadmill is already on. We're in flight. So what happens is in some cases, managers, we talk a lot about growth mindset. They're not really sure which path to take to become better coaches. And that's where this cycle becomes very interesting and dynamic. There's a complexity to it because organizations that are not investing in their managers are also finding that 58% per Gallup, 58% of people leave a job because of their managers. So that cost, that opportunity cost for an organization to think about how do you want to invest in your leaders to ensure that you have retention, that you create talent pipeline, that you don't have attrition, is something to be considered, that there may be an upfront cost, but what's the behind the scenes cost because you're walking talent or you're not getting the right type of talent to come in the door when you have an opening, when you have a vacancy in a role. And so really looking at the whole picture and understanding why a leadership development program or why executive coaching, or even as we bridge into the third type of coaching around strengths, is really ideal to create engagement and to create belonging and allow folks to really feel like there's an investment being made in them so they themselves can invest in the organization.
That's really important to point out. So we've talked a little bit about executive coaching, leadership development coaching. You broached the subject of our third type of coaching, which is strengths coaching, which I think some may or may not be familiar with. It offers us a lot of opportunity and offers organization's opportunity to impact a broader team. Specifically to strengths coaching, why is the lens of strengths coaching so prevalent and powerful?
We talk a lot about some of the statistics around it. I like the math. 1 in 33 million chance that your top 5 will be the same as somebody else's top 5. So unlike many other assessment tools that are out there, the value to Gallup Strengths is in the individuality and how the individuality really shows up within team dynamics. There are 4 key domains. That's the how. How do you move through a work environment, a life environment? It's around executing, building relationships, thinking, and influencing. And all 4 of those components or domains are critical to senior leaders, junior leaders, individual contributors. It doesn't matter what bucket you fall into. If you're an employee, how do you execute? How do you build relationships? How do you influence? And how do you think are critical components to understanding a human, to understanding that relationship. And so we lead all of our managing partners. Nettie, Michael, and I are certified strength coaches. Many of our coaches as part of our community are certified strength coaches because it offers a client the ability to understand and explore themselves first and foremost. What are their superpowers? Instead of focusing on the weaknesses and getting them a little stronger, how do we exploit the strengths and grow the superpowers and be proud of them and crow about them? And then invest that into the organization. Really think about that through the team and through the organization at large lens, and really offer the ability for the organizations and teams to understand the power of the individual. That's why we are so passionate about it. And that's why we lead with Gallup Strengths as a signature tool to help build teams and to help explore individuals within those teams.
When you're talking about the individuals within those teams, what's the key benefit of having a teammate who truly understands your strengths and what you're naturally well inclined to do?
Yeah, so I talked about that 58% of folks leave a job because of their manager. We also know that the math, and there's so many statistics out there, but they range in the 60% plus range, that when you are connected to your job, connected to your organization or boss, that the engagement factor goes up. The engagement factor goes up, leading to higher fulfillment. Fulfillment meaning not that the organization is just serving you, but that you feel engaged and fulfilled within the job that you're serving, the role that you play within the organization. It fills your soul, right? So when we talk about inclusion and belonging, that means that the people around you need to know who you are. If they know who you are, then you can bring your full authentic self to work. When you bring your full self to work, you give the company your full self. If you're going to invest in the hiring and training and development of an employee, don't you want them to give you their full creativity, their full innovation, their full energy? You want that. And Gallup Strengths allows, in very unifying language and very simple language, for organizations to start using a common language across the board to explore an individual's superpowers. So instead of trying to articulate it or find a way to get there, Gallup's Clifton Strengths gives you that tool, and we are the certified strength coaches that can support organizations really developing those tools. So we can come in and really support an organization understanding how to leverage strengths.
I think that for those who might not be familiar with the language of the 34 strengths, I often find that there's an opportunity to understand people better and read their reactions a little bit differently. I recall talking to a teammate who was high in intellection, so they're often processing information, and I was originally mistaking those moments of silence and those moments of just no response as I was confusing the individual. I wasn't very clear. They didn't understand me. But by understanding their strengths, I was better apt to focus my conversation and my sense of presence to know, oh, this individual is just processing the information. It's part of their process. And what I started to build into it because of my understanding of strengths. And this person that I was working with was always to come back a day later and just check in. And it created this dialogue and this response, while others who may be very much focused on impact and immediacy might be wired very differently and act very differently in the room. So I love that you are sharing the value of strengths. And now that we've gone through 3 strengths, I'd like to explore a little bit more, maybe 2 opportunities around coaching that may be a little bit less familiar to our audience. And I thought we could start with one of my newest favorite types of coaching that I've only become exposed to in the last year and a half, which is peer-to-peer coaching and the technology and power that it brings, especially in a hybrid work environment. Can you talk a little bit about peer-to-peer coaching and how it impacts and amplifies teams?
Yeah, absolutely. We lead with a program developed by a company called Imperative called peer-to-peer coaching. And the concept here is quite simple, that we talked earlier about executive and leadership development coaching, and at times it not being as scalable for organizations. The whole process, the theory, the concept behind what Imperative brings and what we offer in terms of facilitation and workshops and experiences around it is that when you enter into an organization, you want connection. And the best way to provide connection is to provide the opportunity for folks to get into an hour conversation and talk to each other and talk about their goals and create accountability partners. We talk about that in all of our business type of coachings, right? Life coaching included, but we don't offer that today. So in the business context, accountability partners are key because they keep you accountable. It's in the name. So that's the concept peer-to-peer, is that 2 peers get in a room, they talk to each other over the course of several sessions and quarters, rotate partners along the way. But through that, they're networking. Nettie often talks about, one of our managing partners, Nettie talks about net weaving. And so what you're doing is you're creating these intercircles, these cross-functional teams, this cross-functional collaboration and communication, which is the lifeblood to organizations being truly meaningfully innovative and truly meaningfully engaged in the objectives of the organization, right? So you want that idea of peer-to-peer connection. And that's what peer-to-peer coaching offers, is you don't necessarily have a coach, a certified coach like myself or others in the room to guide or navigate the conversations. Rather, your peer-to-peer conversations are navigating each other. And through that navigation, you get to explore some of the concepts of coaching and certainly some of the concepts of goal setting.
I love that from peer-to-peer coaching, what I've understood is you're growing your network within an organization. And sometimes when you enter into a job or a company, you may not necessarily be thinking of the next steps and the next stages, but I can appreciate that peer-to-peer coaching is building relationships and a network within an organization broader than the 2 or 10 or 15 people that you're working with on an ongoing basis, and exposing different people within the organization to different parts of the company and different roles. Are there ways in which finding a new network partner, finding a new peer, can grow an individual in ways they don't expect?
Yeah, I think I'll share an example of a story. So there was a client that we had that didn't self-actualize or recognize that they kept saying the words, I can't because, right? And what was happening over the course of time is that folks were saying, well, we can't even ask them because they're just gonna tell us they can't. Through the peer-to-peer coaching, because it was a more intimate setting and they had started to build trust through the platform and through what peer-to-peer coaching offers, they were able to really establish, I'm concerned because I'm having some questions. Can we explore them before we continue? Is this the first priority, a second priority? Really asking the questions a little bit differently versus defaulting to some of that language of I can't, right? And so it was an ability for folks to give each other feedback in the moment. And feedback is key. Feedback is everything, right? So the whole idea here is that through a peer-to-peer coaching experience, you're able to create a safe space built on trust, that you can provide authentic feedback and support a person's goals, support how a person navigates their growth and leadership journey.
I really love that story. Thank you for sharing it and allowing us into this particular narrative. I'd like to close out our time together by really understanding one more powerful type of coaching. And what I find really interesting as our audience listens in on this particular cast is coaching is very powerful, and we and many people are familiar with executive coaching. But I think what the pandemic really unearthed was people's mental wellness, sense of state, and well-being. So I thought it would be great to end our session talking about positive intelligence and how that, well, let's start with, what is positive intelligence? Top line.
So we have a coach, Karen Gray, who is a certified positive intelligence coach. And why we went into this space is because mental well-being, as you mentioned, is critical. And we know from the pandemic that mental well-being, emotional well-being is critical. And for the many, many leaders and bosses that are out there, you're dealing with humans, real people that are parents, that are caring for parents or caring for young people, whether it's children or fill in the blank, right? And so loved ones are needed by loved ones, or demands of people being laid off or job changing or location changing. The complexities are vast. And the whole concept of positive intelligence is built in this idea that in the brain, you have two sides. The neurons operate within two sides, the saboteur and the sage. That when you are receiving information, we are programmed at times to default to the saboteur, default to that negativity of I can't because, or I'm not good at this, or this challenge is too much for me. And through that saboteur, it's a little self-fulfilling. There's a lot to be said about reframing the lens. Through our coaching, we talk about mindfulness, creating awareness, and creating presence. And the whole concept of positive intelligence is to reframe that presence, to reframe that idea of self-awareness, and push that thought, strengthen that muscle, grow the side of the brain that's around sage. So when somebody cancels a meeting at the last second, as an example, the first default could be, oh my gosh, they canceled the meeting. They don't think it's important. I'm not good enough. I'm not a priority for them. That may be a saboteur reaction versus a sage reaction may be about the gift. Okay, you know what? This gives me a chance to regroup and think about the content. Or this gives me a chance to reframe and ask some different questions of the audience to make sure that the meeting is productive, or that the agenda is set thoughtfully. Or maybe a factor has shifted. How do I consider that factor as part of the agenda to make sure that the agenda is, again, meaningful and actionable for the folks that are joining? So there's ways to reshift the brain to think about it through the lens of sage versus the lens of saboteur. And so this is a very powerful new form of coaching. It builds on so much of emotional intelligence and strengths by Gallup. Gallup's, Clifton Strength Finder, which we've talked about. It builds on executive coaching and goal setting. How many times have you set a goal and everything has gone perfectly well, right? So the whole idea of goal setting is to experiment and pilot, and there are going to be some mistakes, or we'll call the word failures. There are going to be some really great opportunities that you skin a knee. And how do you pick yourself up and think about it through a lens of a gift and a sage versus saboteur to keep yourself going and keep yourself accomplishing those goals? And that is the concept. That's one of the big factors of positive intelligence.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, positive intelligence is an opportunity for us to understand our emotional state and its impact on the conversations and our sense of presence in not only the workforce, but in our home lives. Why, when something may happen that's unexpected, we're thrown off, and how to strengthen and stabilize ourselves so we're able to engage in that conversation in a positive manner.
It's certainly a pretty big component of it. It's not the whole piece, but it's definitely a huge chunk of that. It's new. It's fresh. Shahzad, who's the founder of the organization and assessment tool, and who leads this charge, is a brilliant man who's been in the coaching space for many years and is a professor at Stanford. And there's many depths to this tool, but that's certainly a component of it.
Okay, so Shahzad, you mentioned, has a little bit of research at Princeton. How deep is the research from Positive Intelligence, and how much data is supporting this platform and perspective of Positive Intelligence coaching?
So first, Stanford, not Princeton, but two different coasts. And then number two is, I don't know that I'm the right expert to share some of that information. I think that's why we've extended ourselves. We believe that all ships should rise. And Karen Gray is one of the coaches that works with us and leads this charge. And she'd have way more information to share that. But I do know that when folks, and again, this goes back to engagement, this goes back to all the other statistics that are out there around inclusion and belonging, when folks really get the chance to explore themselves and really learn themselves better, and then be able to express that and share that with their world, whether that's in the work context, life context, doesn't matter. When people are able to share themselves more authentically, they're able to offer more of themselves to the space that they're in. And that's what Positive Intelligence offers. It offers an ability to be very much in a coaching space around you and you as an individual, and thinking about what you bring to the plate in terms of all of the greatness that you offer. And that's about mental well-being. That's about mental and emotional well-being. And that's where this type of coaching or this type of experience really serves people well.
Joshua, that's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that information. I'm really curious, because coaching is so impactful, if you could wave a magic wand and in 5 years look ahead to impact coaching in a positive way, what would you hope organizations will take away from this conversation?
I hope people understand very quickly that people are the best asset to unlocking business results. That no matter what happens in AI or robotics, at the end of the day, there are still humans behind that. And the ability for humans to connect and be innovative and thoughtful is the key to everything. And so I want to wave a magic wand and have folks consider their budgets, and have folks consider their hiring practices, and have folks consider what are they doing as organizations, big and small, to invest in their talent.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us. Thank you for our audience on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. And we'll see you next week when we'll talk again. All right. Be well, everyone. Bye, Josh.